Hey guys, tonight we travel to a place where stone lions glare from palace gates, where incense swirls in temple air thick with mystery, and where the line between divine ecstasy and brutal terror blurred under a sky that watched everything. Welcome to ancient Babylon, a civilization steeped in riddles, decadence, and shadowed rituals that promised fertility or demanded it. You're standing barefoot on hot bricks under the golden eye of the sun, your body drenched in perfume and fear. Here in the mighty empire between the Tigris and Euphrates, sexuality wasn't a private matter. It was law, ritual, punishment, even prophecy. And the terrifying part, you're about to be part of it. Whether a trembling virgin selected for temple rites, or a shamed adulterer dragged to judgment under Hammurabi's code, one thing's for sure, this isn't your typical night of boring history. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't wake up in a bed. Beds are a luxury here. You rise disoriented on a woven mat. The walls are mud brick, your room open to the air. Distant bells ring from the ziggurat, and the city hums with early heat. A priestess has been sent for you. You don't understand why yet. You're nobody, a farmer's son, or maybe a girl from the pottery quarter. But today you are summoned to something ancient and sacred, or perhaps something monstrous. The temple of Ishtar looms high, layered like a mountain of stone wrapped in vines. It's the center of it all. Love, war, fertility, chaos. Ishtar embodies them all. Her priestesses are draped in crimson and gold, their eyes coal-lined, lips painted. They smile without joy. In this temple, sex is prayer, and prayer is binding. You are told that the rite is old, older than kings. It must be performed for the river to rise, for grain to grow. They speak of sacred marriage, the hieros gamos, where humans act out the union of gods, but you don't feel divine. You feel stripped, humiliated, frightened. Yet you are cleaned, perfumed, anointed with oils that make your skin burn. You are a vessel now, not for yourself, but for something beyond comprehension. The crowd gathers in silence. You step onto the cool stone platform. The priest-king approaches. He is masked and holds a staff carved with lions. The ceremony begins. And though you're surrounded by hundreds, you are utterly alone. The rite is slow, choreographed, intrusive. You've lost all sense of time. Only afterward do you realize you've cried the whole way through. But you are praised. They say you've pleased the goddess, that your suffering was holy. You are given honey cakes and dates, and then just like that sent away. Your parents say nothing when you return. You're not allowed to speak of what happened, and no one asks. But everyone knows. You've been marked by something greater than yourself. That was just the beginning. Babylon is a place where rules are carved in basalt, literal and brutal. The code of Hammurabi hangs over every household like a shadow. And it has much to say about sexual behavior. Adultery, incest, virginity, defloration, all monitored, all punishable. You think modern dating is hard? Try being a Babylonian wife. If a woman is accused of infidelity, she may be thrown into the river. Literally. If she floats, she's innocent. If she sinks, well, at least the gods have spoken. There's a law for that. Law 132. If a man's wife is caught lying with another man, they shall be bound and cast into the water, unless her husband pardons her. But why would he? The stakes are even worse for women of lower classes. Prostitution, while legal and often ritualized, still carried danger, not the least from disease, shame, or violence. The city's brothels were cramped, humid dens, where desire was currency, but also condemnation. Some women were tattooed, branded, marked as sacred prostitutes to distinguish them from criminals. But that didn't protect them. And yet, the priestesses of Ishtar held power that even kings feared. The high-ranking naditu priestesses could own land, conduct business, even wield political clout. They never married. Their bodies were for the goddess. But their autonomy was a double-edged sword. They belonged to the divine. And what the divine demands, it always takes. Sometimes the terrifying was also the ecstatic. During certain festivals, men and women entered ecstatic trance. Drums beat like a racing heart. Wine flowed. So did blood. Some worshippers mutilated themselves in devotion. Others were overcome by madness. It's said that during Ishtar's descent into the underworld, her followers screamed into the night, tearing their hair, ripping their garments. The god was gone. The world was dying. And when she returned, celebration exploded. Copulation in the streets. Dancers leapt over flames. Couples were encouraged to join in the sacred frenzy. All in Ishtar's name. Desire unleashed. Law suspended. But only for a night. You wonder if those moments felt liberating, or if they were simply chaos with a divine mask. There's a silence after these rituals. A silence that follows you home, lingers in your mind. The taste of something ancient, raw, incomprehensible. In the city's records written on clay tablets kept in cool rooms, you find strange prayers. Some whisper to gods to loosen the hips of my lover. Others beg for healing from what we now know as STDs. You read one that pleads, may her fevered opening be cooled, may her body be whole again. Healing was divine too, but often it came too late. Babylon was full of contradictions. It feared female sexuality, yet deified it. It punished adultery, yet institutionalized prostitution. It prized chastity, yet demanded sacrificial intercourse in its temples. And in the middle of all this were people, real people, like you, trying to navigate rules made by men who thought they spoke for the gods. Some didn't survive the tightrope, and some became gods themselves. Let's follow one of them next. You find yourself in a crowd once again, though this time not as a participant, but as a witness. The temple steps are soaked in crimson banners. The people gather shoulder to shoulder in the sweltering heat. Someone is being paraded forward. She is no ordinary woman. Her headdress gleams like fire in the sun, layered in beaten gold. Her gaze is neither proud nor ashamed, but something deeper, something impossible to name. She is a naditu, a woman set apart from marriage, children, and even common worship. Not a concubine, not a wife, not a priestess in the traditional sense. She lives in a cloister, tends sacred gardens, chants prayers to Shamash, the sun god. And yet, despite her purity, she is not untouched. Her life is a paradox, celibate yet sexualized, revered yet watched closely for betrayal. Whispers pass through the crowd. There was a scandal. A man entered the cloister. Her sanctity defiled. But did she invite him, or was she a victim? It doesn't matter. Not to the priests, not to the onlookers. To violate the terms of the gods is to become unclean, and the punishment must restore balance. But she's not dragged nor pleading. She walks on her own, her chin held high, as if she understands something the crowd never will. Later you hear she was spared, bought off by her father. Or perhaps the priests simply didn't want to anger Shamash by spilling the blood of his daughter. But it stays with you, that look in her eyes, as if she had faced down the abyss and found peace there. And you wonder, what did it mean to be sacred if even sacredness could be punished? You ask around about the sacred prostitutes, the kadishtu. You're told they are more than women of pleasure. They're conduits, vessels of Ishtar herself. The stories say they could see into you, that their touch didn't just bring ecstasy, it revealed truth. There is an older man, a retired scribe, who chuckles when you ask. He tells you that Babylon's fear of sexuality was matched only by its obsession with recording it. He shows you tablets, brittle and worn, etchings of positions, acts, diagrams of bodies tangled in ritual. But these aren't pornography. They're instruction, doctrine, control. Nothing was private, he says. Everything belonged to the gods. You remember that phrase? You start seeing it everywhere in the marketplace, where women wear charm amulets shaped like genitals to ward off infertility. In the courtroom, where a husband can accuse a wife of loose behavior based only on rumor, and her fate hinges on how convincingly she weeps. In the baths, where conversations are laced with fear of curses, of impotence, of divine retribution for lust unfulfilled. Desire is not yours, it is borrowed, and it can be taken back. That night, you dream of the goddess again, not in her temple, but in the desert. Her hair is tangled wild with stars. She does not walk, she floats above the ground, barefoot, bleeding. From her mouth pours a song you cannot understand. Behind her trails a procession of animals, lions, owls, scorpions. She is both lover and destroyer. You wake up with the scent of myrrh in your nose. In Babylon, dreams are not just dreams. They are messages, omens, warnings. You visit the temple of Marduk to speak to a dream reader. The priest is blind. He listens to your account and nods slowly. She has chosen you, he says, but not for love, for witness. The word chills you. Witness, not participant, not victim, not priest. You are to observe, to remember. And that's when the stories begin to find you. There's the tale of the virgin bride who bled to death on her wedding night, too young, too unprepared, her husband more interested in proving his power than sharing pleasure. The midwife was punished not for failing to save her, but for failing to prepare her. Then there's the story of the eunuch priest who served Ishtar with devotion so fierce he willingly cut himself to become closer to her. Some said he could fly when he danced. Others said he wept blood every full moon. His name is lost, but his story remains. And still more of mothers forced to abandon infants conceived during temple rites, of lovers cursed for making love in the wrong direction under the wrong moon, of young boys taken from home to be raised in temples, taught to serve older men before they even understood the meaning of their own bodies. None of this is fiction. It's etched into clay, preserved in archives beneath the palace floors. Babylon left no sin undocumented, no ecstasy unexplained. You begin to see the pattern. Control. That is the heart of it. Not pleasure, not love. Control disguised as divine will. Sex in Babylon was a tool for kings, for gods, for priests. It could bless a field or doom a family. It could raise a woman to high office or cast her into the river. It was everywhere and nowhere truly free. Even marriage, which you once thought sacred, is transactional. A father pays a bride price. A virginity cloth is displayed after the wedding night to prove the girl was untouched. If blood is absent, punishment is swift. No one asks whether the bride was willing, only whether she was pure. And yet through it all there are moments of rebellion. You hear of secret lovers who met by the riverbanks, carved messages into palm leaves, left tokens beneath broken bricks. Of women who used herbs and incantations to prevent pregnancy, refusing to bear children they never chose. Of men who paid temple prostitutes not for sex, but for listening long hours spent whispering stories, sharing griefs. There is humanity still burning beneath the ritual. You begin to wonder, in a world so obsessed with controlling bodies, could a stolen kiss be the most sacred act of all? You walk through the bazaar, head spinning from these thoughts. Someone sells clay figurines of lovers entwined. Another hawks fertility idols shaped like exaggerated hips and breasts. A beggar sings a hymn to Ishtar so filthy and poetic it draws a crowd. Laughter ripples through the air, and you realize something else: Babylon never pretended to be clean. It reveled in filth. It built its temples on foundations of lust, blood, and contradiction. And it survived somehow for centuries. But how many people vanished into its rituals, nameless, voiceless? How many prayers were whispered that sounded more like begging? You pass a girl sweeping temple steps. Her hair is unkempt, her feet bare. She looks at you, and for a brief second, you see it again, that same gaze the naditu wore. Not fear, not pride, just knowledge. Ancient, burdened, endless. She lowers her eyes, keeps sweeping, and you keep walking. There is more to learn, much more. In the next quarter of the city lies a place they don't talk about. But you will, because you've been chosen to witness. And the next chamber of Babylon's secrets is opening before you now. You move east toward the district that doesn't appear on most maps. The streets narrow here, pressed in by walls that seem to breathe with heat. The stones underfoot are slick, not with rain, but with something else. The scent of spice turns bitter, and the laughter of the market fades behind you. You've reached what they call the lower quarter, though no one speaks its name aloud. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's understood. This is where desire isn't sacred. It's sold, traded, taken. The brothels of Babylon aren't marked by signs. You know them by the silk drapes in the windows, the flicker of oil lamps even in broad daylight. A thin girl no older than 12 leans in a doorway. Her eyes are lined with charcoal, but her expression is blank. She doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. Inside, the air is thicker. Perfume and sweat and fear swirl together into a scent that's impossible to forget. You're greeted by a woman whose smile doesn't reach her eyes. Her name is Ninushka. She's been here 20 years, she says, long enough to remember when kings still passed through these halls. She leads you through corridors lined with murals, painted bodies locked in poses too intricate to be real. But they are real. Every scene is a memory, she tells you. Every one a contract. You ask her if she ever served in the temple. She laughs, a low sound like gravel. They say we serve the goddess too, she says. Only difference is she doesn't protect us. You learn that some of the women here were once kadishtu, expelled from the temple for reasons they refuse to explain. Others were sold by desperate fathers or sent by mothers who feared what starvation would do first. A few came of their own will. That, Ninushka says, is the most dangerous kind, because Babylon punishes agency as much as it punishes sin. You are shown a chamber where men are blindfolded before entering. The women wear masks of bronze shaped like lions, bulls, serpents. The game, you are told, is to guess which goddess you've been given. If the man guesses wrong, he pays double. If he guesses right, well, no one ever does. It's performance, but also theology. Babylon taught that sex was a gateway, a revelation, and sometimes the only way to survive it was to become something inhuman, to wear a mask so tightly even you forgot what was underneath. Nanushka offers you a place to sit, a bowl of dates, a cup of spiced beer. Around you, soft footsteps echo like whispers. No one looks you in the eye. Not until a boy enters barefoot, no older than 16. He kneels beside her. She strokes his hair absent-mindedly. He was taken after his sister was chosen for the temple, she says. Balance must be kept. You realize then that Babylon's thirst for ritual didn't end at gender. It absorbed everything. It demanded offerings from every family, every household. It didn't matter if you were daughter or son virgin or widow noble or slave. If the gods wanted you, you went. And if the gods didn't want you, then the city did. Somewhere outside, drums begin to thrum. Another ritual is starting. But here in the lower quarter, no one moves. They've heard it all before. Instead, Nanushka tells you a story. It begins with a woman named Naditu, a name older than Babylon itself. She was the first to defy the gods, the first to choose her own lovers, the first to walk away. They say she became a demon, cursed to haunt the night, stealing seed from men and breath from children. But Nanushka tells it differently. She was the first who knew her own worth, she says, and they punished her for it. You're not sure if Lilitu was real, but her shadow hangs over every room in this district. A warning, a promise. You finish your drink and rise. Nanushka doesn't stop you. She only says one thing before you go. Tell the truth, she whispers, even if no one believes you. Back on the streets, the heat has changed. The sun is lower, casting long shadows, but the city is still alive, always alive. You pass a stall selling aphrodisiacs, ground lotus powdered, beetle shell, dried river moss. A woman offers you a vial of something black as ink. For potency, she winks. Or for forgetting. You don't buy it. But part of you wonders if you should have, because the more you learn, the harder it is to forget. You find yourself walking toward the river. The Euphrates glimmers like molten silver. This is where women were tested, where men washed before weddings, where slaves were branded after being sold. Water was life, but it was also judgment. At the river's edge, you see a priest, not a grand figure in gold, but a thin, tired man scraping clay from his sandals. He notices you and gestures to sit. You've been learning, he says without asking. You nod. Then understand this, he continues. Babylon didn't invent these practices. It inherited them. From Sumer, from Akkad, from bloodlines stretching back to mud and stars. We only carved them deeper. He reaches into a bag and pulls out a tablet, cracked and worn. This is older than Hammurabi, he says. Read. The cuneiform is dense, but you recognize a few signs. It's a hymn, a prayer, but not to a god, to a woman. The lines speak of her hair like dark rivers, her hips wide as the crescent moon, her laughter full of omens. The words are graphic, erotic, and yet reverent. She was once divine, the priest says, before she was feared. You ask who she was. He smiles, all of them. The priest leaves you with the tablet. You sit by the river tablet in lap, the sun dipping below the horizon. In the distance, bells ring from the ziggurat again. You begin to understand something terrible. Babylon was not confused about sex. It knew exactly what it was doing. It took the most powerful force in the human body and wrapped it in myth, in law, in fear. It made it sacred so it could control it. And it made it terrifying, so no one would try. You rise slowly, returning to the city's center. Past markets, past courtyards, past the fading laughter of children, chasing fireflies through the dust. You're headed now to the archives, to the place where all stories go to die or to be preserved. Because if Babylon feared anything more than desire, it was memory. And in the next chamber, we'll find out what secrets they tried hardest to forget. The archive is colder than you expect. Not from wind, but from depth deep beneath the palace grounds, where clay tablets sleep in stone coffins and papyrus scrolls are sealed in copper jars. You enter through a low archway guarded by two statues of bull-headed men, their eyes blind but watching all the same. A scribe greets you. His robe is plain, his hands stained with ink. He does not ask your name. He simply turns and begins to walk, and you follow. You descend a staircase lit only by oil lamps. With every step, the noise of the city fades. Babylon above grows louder with life and trade and firelight. But here time has been embalmed. This is where truth lives, the scribe murmurs, and you understand. Not the truth the priests chant or the kings proclaim, but the truth buried, whispered, inked in symbols so ancient even their meaning has changed with the centuries. He shows you a wall lined with tablets, some cracked, some still damp with oil used to preserve them. He picks one with delicate fingers and places it in your hands. This one was never meant for public eyes, he says. The marks are erratic, not the careful calligraphy of law or royal record, but the quick, raw etchings of someone desperate to remember or to confess. You read it slowly. It is the journal of a midwife. She tells of a nobleman's wife who was forced to undergo a purification rite after failing to conceive. The rite involved sacred penetration by a priest using a ceremonial rod carved with prayers. She bled for days. The husband demanded another ritual. The woman disappeared. The tablet ends with a single line, "I cannot cleanse what the gods have broken." You place the tablet back on its shelf, your hands trembling. The scribe is already offering another. This one is smaller, smoother. A love poem. It begins innocently enough, praise of a woman's hair, her scent. But then it shifts. The poet speaks of chaining her ankles with silk, of binding her arms in reeds, of silencing her mouth, not with fear, but with worship. It is soft and violent all at once. You feel your breath catch. Babylon did not separate love from control, the scribe says, nor control from devotion. Another tablet. This one with diagrams, phallic charms, womb-shaped pendants, carved vulvas mounted on doorframes to ward off demons. But also instruments, tools used in temple rites, hooks, loops, ritual knives. Not for sacrifice, at least not of animals. You ask if anyone has ever seen these rites performed today. The scribe doesn't answer. Instead, he takes you into the deepest room. The air is thick with incense. On the far wall, painted in ochre and ash, is a mural almost faded from time. It depicts a procession. A woman robed in flame-like fabric is lifted on a throne by naked servants. Behind her walks a line of men and women, all marked with cuts on their thighs. Some carry bowls. Others bear staffs with curved ends shaped like crescents. Their faces are painted white. Their eyes are closed. She is the goddess, the scribe says, and these are her chosen, not priests, not slaves, something in between. You ask what the bowls contain. Seed, he replies, collected, mixed, offered. The mural makes your skin crawl. It is beautiful, sacred, but undeniably invasive. Not everyone gave willingly, he adds. You turn away, heart pounding. The scribe leads you to a final chamber. Here the walls are blank. No paintings, no carvings, just silence. This is the room of remains, he says. Inside are boxes, simple wooden containers sealed with wax. You open one. Inside you find bones, small, delicate, too small to be adult. These were found beneath the temple floors. Infants, many, always female. You feel yourself sway. Some say they were stillborn, he continues. Others say they were offered. The silence thickens. Not everything written was meant to be read. Not everything performed was meant to be questioned. But here in this crypt of memory, even the unspoken bleeds through. You ask why they kept these records. He smiles faintly, because Babylon believed memory was more powerful than shame. You sit for a moment, surrounded by clay, by ash, by the soft flutter of ancient horrors preserved for eternity. The stories weigh on you. Not just the acts, but the justifications. The beauty twisted into obedience. The worship turned into wound. You want to leave, but you don't rise. Not yet. Because this room, this place, is the key to understanding it all. You realize now Babylon didn't simply use sexuality to control. It used it to mythologize control, to turn dominance into narrative, to make the most intimate human experience a tool of empire. And once it did, there was no limit. No one could escape the rules, because the rules wore the face of the gods. Even children born of rape could be declared sacred. Even violence, if done in the temple, became prayer. Even silence could be sanctified. You finally rise. The scribe walks you to the staircase. He does not follow you out. You ascend alone, each step feeling heavier than the last. When you reach the surface, the sun is gone. Babylon glows with firelight, its towers like ribs in the night. And now you see it differently. Not just a city of trade, invention, and brilliance, but a city that dared to wrap its darkness in gold and call it divine. You walk slowly through streets that hum with life. Laughter, argument, music, and behind every sound, the echo of something else. You pass a wall freshly painted with another Ishtar mural, this one more tame, just a lion at her feet. Her gaze raised to the stars. But you know better now. You know what lies behind that gaze. And you're not done. Because there is one ritual you haven't yet witnessed. The one done in secret. The one never carved in stone. Only whispered and lived. Let's go there next. Let's go to the chambers where Babylon's most hidden rites unfolded not by priests, but by those who refused to obey. Because in the shadows of empire, rebellion always finds its shape. You slip into the outskirts of the city just before midnight. Babylon's walls, colossal and glittering with glazed bricks, fall away behind you as the air thins and the sounds grow quieter. But you're not heading for solitude. You're seeking the secret pulse beneath the official hymns, the soft drum of rebellion, that still beats in alleyways and behind curtained doors. They say there were two Babylons, the one that paid homage to the gods and the one that refused. And now you're stepping into the latter. It begins with a knock. A sequence, one tap, two, quick, one long. The wooden door opens to darkness. No words. Just a hand reaching out, beckoning. You hesitate, then follow. The passage is narrow. Earth beneath your feet. Oil lamps flicker along the walls, their light low and trembling. Ahead, voices hum, not chanting, not speaking. Something between, as if language here must be unrecognizable to outsiders. You emerge into a chamber you never expected. No temple finery, no golden statues. Just people, half-dressed faces painted with ash, bodies marked not with the tattoos of sacred prostitutes or temple slaves, but with symbols you don't recognize. A circle around the heart, a broken line on the left wrist, a flame traced on the spine. They do not rise to greet you. They simply nod. You've found the ones who rejected Babylon's script. They are not priests, yet they lead rites. They are not concubines, yet they embrace each other freely. Here the sacred has no name. The rules do not exist. Gender is not fixed. Bodies are not offered, they are reclaimed. A woman speaks first. Her voice is like stone sliding across stone. We do not fear the goddess, she says. We fear forgetting who we are without her. They call themselves the unclaimed. Descendants of those cast-out children born of temple rites, who were never recorded, midwives, who refused to perform rituals, lovers who would not follow the celestial calendar. Their rites are not for display. They happen in quiet corners, often in silence. One involves the binding of hands not to control, but to build trust. Another centers on breath alone, where two people press their foreheads together and simply breathe, matching rhythm until tears come. You watch a pair of lovers perform a dance where they never touch, but mirror every movement, fluid, intimate, tender. It is more erotic than anything you've seen in the temples. And when they finish, the woman from earlier approaches you again. Babylon taught us sex belongs to the gods, she says. We believe it belongs to us. There is a weight in those words, a defiance that runs deeper than blasphemy. These people are rewriting the stories without tablets, without scribes, with skin, with memory. You ask if they fear punishment. She smiles, slow and sad. Some of us were already punished, she says. But now at least it's for something we chose. A man nearby begins to sing. No words, just melody. Others join him slowly, their voices weaving together like threads pulled tight. You're drawn in, not by spectacle, by the rawness of it. And then something unexpected happens. They invite you to participate, not in the way the temples demanded, not with performance or submission, just presence. They place a warm stone in your hands, smooth and curved. You are told to sit, to breathe, to remember your body without shame, without expectation. At first, nothing comes. Then images, flashes, the Naditu girl's eyes, Ninushka's quiet despair, the mural in the archive, the bones in the box, and finally your own breath, steady, real. When the rite ends, no one speaks, but something inside you has shifted. They thank you, not with words, but with a hand placed gently on your shoulder. You are not one of them, but you've been permitted to see. As you rise to leave, you notice a wall painted in symbols, not cuneiform, not pictographs. Marks made with fingers, charcoal, and time. A language beyond translation. You ask the woman what it says. She pauses, then whispers, "We remember what Babylon wants to forget." Outside, the night is cool. The stars hang heavy. Babylon still hums in the distance, its towers lit, its temples awake with late rites. But you've glimpsed another truth. That rebellion existed even in the heart of control. That not all bowed before Ishtar or Marduk. That for every law carved into stone, someone somewhere refused to obey it. You pass through the city again, but now it feels different, less imposing, less eternal. You begin to see the cracks, the peeling paint behind the gold, the silence behind the songs, and you start to notice the women who don't walk in step, the boys who wear jewelry once reserved for priestesses, the men who gather beneath trees whispering verses never read in temples. They are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. The unclaimed are not few. They are the undercurrent. And though Babylon pretends not to see them, it fears them more than invaders, because they remember. Not the official stories, not the laws, but the feeling of being used and choosing otherwise. You find yourself back at the river again, this time not for judgment, just to sit. The water flows quietly. A child nearby skips stones across its surface, laughing. And you wonder how many stories were lost here, washed away with the silt. How many faces vanished beneath the surface, unnamed and unavenged, and yet the river continues, unapologetic, unafraid. Like the people you just met. You rise. The night has grown deeper. But Babylon never sleeps. Your next stop is a tower, a ziggurat, but not for worship. This one contains something rarer, an account written by a woman herself. Not about ritual, not about law, but about pleasure. Because in all of Babylon's noise, the one voice hardest to hear was her own. Let's go there next. Let's climb to the highest room in the city, where one forgotten woman dared to say what desire meant to her. Not to the gods, not to the king, to herself. You climb slowly, step by uneven step, into the night air. The ziggurat ahead towers like a stairway carved into the stars, each layer narrower than the last, rising above the dusty sprawl of Babylon. You pass the lower terraces, where priests chant and burn herbs, to summon dreams, then up through levels rarely seen by commoners, levels where scribes transcribe omens, where nobles come to whisper their sins, where no one expects you to climb. But you keep going. Because at the very top, sealed in a room forgotten by time, lies a fragment, one woman's voice preserved not by decree, but by sheer defiance. When you reach the summit, your breath is ragged. The air is thinner up here, still and dry. The stars feel close, as though they're leaning in to listen. A door awaits you, smooth stone marked by hand. Not a lock, but a challenge. You push it open. The room is small. Dust blankets everything. But at its center, on a low platform, sits a single tablet. Unlabeled, untouched. You kneel before it, brushing the dust from its surface. The script is familiar, but its tone is not. No official cuneiform formula. No invocations to Ishtar or Marduk. No declarations of law or lineage. Just a beginning. This is the song I was never allowed to sing. It is a woman's account. Her name lost, but her story intact. She speaks of her first desire not for a priest, not for a husband, but for a girl in her family's garden. They touched only once, hands grazing, while reaching for figs, and yet the memory burned through her ever since. She was married at 13 to a merchant older than her father. The union was legal, blessed, celebrated, but she writes of her wedding night with language that aches how her body closed in on itself, how her breath turned to ash, how she learned to cry without sound. But desire, real desire, didn't leave her. It returned in dreams, in fleeting moments at the river, in the scent of a certain oil, in the brush of a servant girl's hand while braiding her hair. She writes that pleasure when it came was never about duty. It was a rebellion. A fire lit in defiance of everything she was told about being a wife, a woman, a daughter of Babylon. She never names her lovers. She protects them, but she describes them with poetry that bleeds across the clay. She calls one moon-breathed, another wind-born, a third the silence between drums. In a city obsessed with controlling sexuality, she carved out her own lexicon of joy. She writes of hidden places, gardens tucked between rooftops, baths at midnight, scroll rooms, used only once every 7 years, of whispered vows never sanctioned by temple law, of hands that healed what ceremony had broken. But the most remarkable thing isn't what she did. It's what she refused to do. She refused to offer her pleasure to the gods. She refused to call her joy a sacrifice. She refused to repent. She writes, "They taught me to pray by kneeling. I learned to live by standing." There's a bitterness in her words, but also light, a sense of awakening. She speaks of watching other women, the young temple girls, the unwilling brides, the trembling concubines, and wanting to tell them, it doesn't have to feel like dying. She couldn't say it aloud, so she wrote it here. You sit with her words for a long time. This isn't just a personal journal. It's a testament, a refusal to let Babylon's silence swallow her story. A last act of rebellion not by blade or fire but by truth. You don't know how this tablet survived. Perhaps someone hid it. Perhaps someone in the priesthood read it and couldn't bear to destroy it. Perhaps it was simply forgotten like the woman herself. But now you've found it. And that changes everything. Because up until now, Babylon's story has been told through the hands of men, priests, kings, scribes. Even the sacred prostitutes were written about, not written by. This tablet cracks that silence. And through it you hear her. You hear the shame she refused to carry, the boundaries she refused to let define her, the ache she transformed into freedom. Not in spite of Babylon, but inside it. She didn't escape. She didn't run. She stayed. And still, she found pleasure. You wonder how many others were like her. How many quiet acts of defiance happened in the shadow of ziggurats. How many bodies moved in ways the gods never dictated. How many stories lie buried under the layers of official records waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find them. You leave the chamber as slowly as you entered. The stars blink gently overhead. The city below is a quilt of firelight and smoke. Somewhere a drum pulses. Somewhere a woman is whispering her first truth. You descend the steps in silence. At the base of the ziggurat, a group of girls sings a lullaby. You pause to listen. It's soft. About a goddess who fell in love with a river and refused to return to the sky. They laugh when they miss a verse. One nudges another with her elbow, teasing. And for a brief moment, you wonder, did the woman who wrote the tablet ever sing this song as a child? Did she laugh like this, unaware of the weight the world would soon place on her? You walk away, but the melody stays with you. Because now the story is no longer just about terror and control. It's about resistance, intimate, invisible, inescapable. And if there's one thing Babylon couldn't bury, it was the quiet strength of those who refused to let the gods speak for them. But we're not done yet. Next, we'll enter a royal chamber where power and sex were tangled into policies, and kings used desire not just to rule, but to dominate the very soul of the city. Because when you carry the weight of an empire, what you do behind closed doors matters more than anyone dares to admit. The palace smells of cedar myrrh and heat. Not the kind of heat that comes from the sun, but the kind that radiates from secrets pressed against silk walls and whispered into perfumed skin. The throne room is grand, yes, columns wrapped in gold leaf lions carved into stone, but it's not where Babylon's most dangerous decisions were made. Those happened in the harem. And tonight, you're walking straight into it. It isn't like the stories, no orgies on cushions, no fountains bubbling wine. The harem is quiet, controlled. A world unto itself, ruled not by kings, but by women who learned to wield silence like a dagger. You pass through a series of veiled thresholds. At each one, your surroundings grow softer, less regal, more intimate. At last, you're brought before the head of the harem. She doesn't give her name. She doesn't need to. Her posture is regal, her gaze heavy. She's older than you expected, with silver streaking her black hair, and hands calloused, not from labor, but from keeping secrets. She gestures for you to sit, and when you do, she begins to speak not with introductions, but with history. We weren't prisoners, she says. We were power dressed in perfume. You learn that the harem wasn't merely a place to store wives and concubines. It was a political battlefield. Women here were trained in poetry, astronomy, negotiation. They weren't just beautiful, they were dangerous. Each carried the ambition of her bloodline and the hopes of her tribe. And if she bore the king a son, her influence multiplied tenfold. But sex was the currency, and everyone was watching. The woman tells you of selection nights when the king would walk the harem, choosing who would share his bed. Sometimes he picked based on dreams, sometimes on omens, sometimes on sheer whim. To be chosen could mean elevation, wealth, family favors, or ruin. Because if you failed to please, word traveled. If you cried, the wrong ear heard it. If you tried to resist, you vanished. Some women never even made it to the bed. They were poisoned by rivals, cast out by jealous consorts, framed for plots they never conceived. Every touch of the king was a negotiation. Every sigh a potential alliance. And beneath it all, the terrifying truth that the king's appetite shaped policy. If he favored a concubine from the north, treaties followed. If he grew cold toward a wife from the west, her homeland suffered. War was sometimes born in whispers, in glances exchanged over bare shoulders. The woman leads you to a private chamber, hers. Here the walls are painted with scenes of intimacy, but not pleasure. Women offering themselves trembling. A man seated always in shadow. This is the reality, she says. We weren't lovers. We were leverage. She tells you of a girl barely 13 sent from a border province. Her dowry was a fleet of ships. Her skin was pale, her tongue foreign. She lasted 2 weeks before hanging herself with her sash. The court mourned publicly but privately. They sighed in relief. Her death solved a diplomatic stalemate. Another woman older learned how to read the king's moods by the way he folded his robe. She survived 20 years, controlled access to him, dictated who bore his children. She was unofficially more powerful than any priest, and yet she too had once wept alone in this chamber. You sit on the floor where hundreds of women have sat before you, braided each other's hair, whispered fears, plotted escapes. The woman pours you a drink made from tamarind and herbs. Bitter, sharp. She tells you one final story of a woman whose name is forbidden, now struck from records, erased from tablets. She seduced the king not through beauty, but through laughter. She made him forget his generals, ignore his priests, revoke laws, forgive debts. And when he died, they blamed her. They said she was a witch, a demon Ishtar reborn in flesh. She was executed not for betrayal, but for power. Because Babylon had a place for every kind of woman, slave, concubine, priestess, but not one who dared to be more than all three. The woman sets down her cup. We learned to survive in the shadow of the throne, she says. But some of us wanted the throne itself. You walk the halls in silence afterward, passing mirrors of polished bronze that reflect more than your face. You see the ghost of a girl painting her lips, a woman whispering in Akkadian behind a closed curtain, a mother writing her son's name in clay, praying the king never sees it. And you begin to understand that the palace wasn't just the center of power, it was the epicenter of desire weaponized. Not the kind that burns quick and bright, but the kind that lingers, that binds, that breaks dynasties in the middle of the night. You exit the harem as dawn peeks over the horizon. The city is quiet, lulled into the breath between night and day. You pause on the terrace and look down upon Babylon, its sprawl, its brilliance, its lies. The king may have ruled in public, but in private, it was desire that steered the ship, and desire here was never innocent. Next, we descend again, this time into a house that looks ordinary. A family home, a clay courtyard. But what happens behind its closed doors will reveal how far Babylon's ideas of purity and shame infected even the smallest spaces. Because the most terrifying rituals weren't always performed by priests. Sometimes they were taught by mothers. The house looks like any other. Mud brick walls, a low wooden door, a courtyard shaded by palm leaves. Chickens cluck softly in the corner. A child's doll carved from wood lies abandoned near the threshold. There's nothing to suggest that inside something sacred or something terrifying is happening. And yet, this is Babylon. And in Babylon, no space is untouched by ritual. You step into the courtyard. The air smells of herbs, coriander, dried mint, and something metallic beneath it. Maybe copper, maybe blood. A woman appears from behind a reed curtain. Her arms are strong, her eyes steady. She's a mother, clearly, but also something else. She nods for you to enter. Inside the home, clay jugs line the walls. Cloth hangs to divide each room. The floors are clean. You're brought to the center where a small fire burns in a raised hearth. 3 girls sit cross-legged around it, their heads bowed. One is no older than 8. Another might be 12. The woman whom you now recognize as both mother and midwife begins to chant softly. Not to a god, not to the stars, but to the body. She speaks of hips that will widen, wombs that will ache, blood that will come whether wanted or not. This is the rite of instruction, the unspoken preparation for a life under Babylon's gaze. It begins with the rubbing of oil, not for pleasure, but to teach. The girls are taught where they will be touched by others and what to expect. They are shown how to clean themselves not with water alone, but with salt and ash. One girl flinches as the woman demonstrates. She is corrected, gently, but firmly. They must not cry, the woman tells you. The city does not cry for them. Then comes the lesson of silence. The girls are told stories of women who spoke too freely of their lovers, of wives, who confided in neighbors, of girls who laughed at the wrong time and were branded for indecency. They are taught to smile without revealing joy, to grieve without showing pain, to become vessels for honor. The oldest girl is given a cloth white linen folded thrice. When your time comes, the mother says, "This cloth must carry your proof." You realize what it is, the virginity cloth. After a bride's first night, it must bear blood. If it doesn't, she may be stoned, or drowned, or simply cast out. So the girls are taught to bite their lips, to clench their muscles, to bleed, even if they must force it. One whispers, "What if there is no blood?" The woman doesn't answer, but you see it in her eyes. She knows. The ritual ends not with a blessing, but with a test. The girls are given a task to carry a pot of water across the courtyard without spilling. It's symbolic, she explains. They must walk with grace, balance, composure. No emotion must disturb the surface. One girl spills a few drops. She is made to start over. You sit in silence watching. This is not a temple. This is not a rite inscribed on tablets. But it is just as binding, because this quiet conditioning is how Babylon perpetuated itself. Not just through law, but through daily life, through repetition, through ritual disguised as culture. After the girls are dismissed, the mother sits beside you. Her hands tremble slightly as she pours you a drink, date wine, thick and sweet. She tells you that she was taught the same way, that on her wedding night, she bit into her own arm to leave blood on the sheet, that her mother watched her the next morning, waiting for confirmation. And when it came, she wept with relief. Not joy, relief. Because in Babylon, a girl's body didn't belong to herself. It belonged to her father, then her husband, then her sons. And if it deviated, if it loved too freely, bled too little, desired the wrong person, it became dangerous. She speaks of herbs passed in secret to bring on menstruation, to end unwanted pregnancies. She tells you of women who mixed clay with pomegranate juice and whispered prayers while inserting them into themselves. None of it was legal, all of it was survival. She shows you a bundle of dried roots hidden in a clay jar labeled soap. It's not soap, it's a contraceptive, ancient, risky, sometimes deadly, but better dead, she says quietly, than branded. You don't know what to say, because this isn't about belief. It's about fear, and the way that fear was baked into everyday life. The mother stands and opens a small wooden box. Inside are tokens, bracelets, bits of cloth, a stone carved in the shape of a crescent moon. These are from the women I've helped, she says. Girls who left before the city could ruin them. Some ran away to temples pretending to seek purification. Some disguised themselves as men and vanished into caravans. Some simply disappeared. And though they're gone, she remembers them. This is her private ritual, a kind of reverse altar not to the gods but to the daughters Babylon failed. You rise to leave, but she stops you. She presses a small, carved token into your hand, a lion curled around itself, the symbol of strength and silence. For remembering, she says, you step back out into the courtyard. The girls are gone now. The doll is gone too. The sun hangs high, and the city pulses on. But now you understand the extent of its reach, not just through kings and temples and brothels, but through lullabies and dinner tables and quiet lessons whispered in a mother's breath. You walk through the streets with the token in your hand. Because the next place you'll visit is the one where Babylon's darkest secrets weren't performed in ritual, but revealed through punishment, through shame, through pain branded onto skin. Because what the city celebrated in public, it often punished in private. Let's go now to the place of judgment, the place where desire met consequence, and where the price of pleasure was carved into flesh. The house of judgment doesn't stand out. There are no towering gates or statues of gods. It crouches near the city's edge, built low into the earth, as if trying to hide from the sky. The walls are scorched black, not from fire, but from the sheer weight of what's passed through them. No songs are sung here. No incense burns. Only silence and the steady clink of chains behind stone. You step through the arched entrance. The air shifts immediately cooler, drier, and thick with the absence of mercy. A priest judge greets you. His robes are immaculate, his face unreadable. This is not a temple priest. This man doesn't deal in sacred riddles or divine inspiration. He deals in guilt and the bodies that bear it. He does not ask why you've come. He only says you'll observe. Nothing more. He leads you past rooms where verdicts are delivered not with words, but with instruments. Bronze rods, wooden frames, hot stones. Babylon, for all its grandeur, believed that justice was best understood when felt through the skin. You enter a chamber lined with benches. At the center stands a woman naked, but for a linen cloth at her hips, arms bound above her to a tall wooden pole. Her face is swollen. She does not cry. The charge, adultery. Her husband accused her. No proof was needed, only suspicion. She claimed innocence, said she was barren, not unfaithful, but she couldn't produce the bloodied sheet from her wedding night. And that was enough. The punishment is public lashing, 7 strokes with the rod of Marduk. Each blow is meant to purge her of the sin, whether she committed it or not. The priest judge explains almost academically that this ritual serves 2 purposes. First, to cleanse the soul. Second, to remind the city that desire is not free. The whip falls. Once, twice. You want to look away, but you don't. Because in this city, witnessing is its own kind of penance. When it's done, she collapses, not unconscious, not dead, just emptied. She is released. No physician tends to her. No family waits. She leaves alone. Another room now. This one smaller. A man this time. Naked as well. Crouched in the corner, shaking. He was caught with another man, his brother-in-law. They were found in a wine cellar, both drunk, both exposed. The penalty is harsher. Not death, at least not officially. But he is to be tattooed. Not with a symbol of shame. With words. He touched what was not his. It will be carved into his thigh, visible only when he is naked. A secret punishment for a secret crime. The tattooer arrives. His tools are sharp, dipped in ink and ash. The man weeps as the needle cuts. The priest tells you this is mercy. That in older times men like him were burned alive. Drowned. Buried beneath altars. Now they simply carry the mark. Forever. You walk on your heart heavy. But the worst is still ahead. You're taken to the chamber of virgins. Here, girls suspected of lying about their virginity are examined physically, invasively, with no regard for dignity. Midwives perform the checks. Older women who carry out the task like farmers inspecting grain. They do not flinch. They do not pause. You watch as a girl of maybe 15 is made to lie back. Her wrists are held, her legs forced open. She bites her own arm to keep from screaming. She passes, barely. She is given back to her father, who does not meet her eyes. Another girl fails. She's taken away. You ask where. The priest doesn't answer. You want to scream, but you don't. Because in Babylon, even rage is dangerous. You move on to the archives, where punishments are recorded in neat script, tablet after tablet detailing judgments. A woman who danced alone in a courtyard, fined for indecency. A man who kissed his wife in public, fined for defiling sacred modesty. A girl who laughed during a fertility rite, flogged, then assigned to temple labor for a year. These are not rare cases. They are routine. Babylon wasn't simply obsessed with sex. It was obsessed with controlling when, where, and how it occurred. Who could enjoy it? Who must suffer it? Who would be punished simply for desiring the wrong thing? And desire in Babylon was always the wrong thing, unless it served the gods or the king. You leave the house of judgment feeling unclean, not because you participated, because you watched, because you did nothing. The priest thanks you formally, as if you've attended a lecture. He hands you a token, a piece of fired clay, shaped like an open eye. To remember, he says, and to remind. You walk back through the city, clutching the token tight. You pass lovers stealing glances, mothers pulling daughters inside, boys laughing too loudly in alleys. All of them living under invisible rules too dangerous to question. But you've seen them now. Not the rituals, the consequences. And you understand the truth that Babylon tried to hide beneath its temples and poems and prayers, that punishment was never about justice. It was about preservation. The preservation of power, of structure, of fear. Desire threatened all of it. And so it had to be managed, measured, marked, sometimes in blood, sometimes in ink, but always in silence. You reach your quarters just as the moon rises. It hangs over the city like a blade. You sit with the token in your hand, and you ask yourself, what does it mean to want something in a place where wanting can destroy you? There's one place left to visit, one final layer of Babylon's machinery, a place not of pain but of prophecy, where sexuality wasn't punished, but used to tell the future. Let's go now to the dream sanctuaries, where oracles writhed in divine ecstasy, and where secrets were not punished but summoned. You wake before dawn, drawn by something you don't understand. Not dread, not desire, something quieter, like the pull of a thread you didn't realize was wrapped around your chest. You dress, simply wrap your robe tight against the morning chill, and begin walking. Everyone has told you the dream sanctuaries lie beyond the city walls, tucked near the fields where the barley grows wild, and the herons rise from the reeds like spirits. Not quite temple, not quite wilderness. They exist on the border between worlds, like the dreams they chase. You pass through a narrow gate guarded by no one. Just a wooden arch hung with feathers and bones. A breeze stirs the air, cool and damp, and suddenly everything is quieter. Even the birds seem to lower their voices here. The sanctuary appears as a ring of stone huts and thatched shelters encircling a flat platform of pressed earth. In its center, a large stone slab rests warm from some inner fire. Smoke curls from unseen channels in the earth. You smell sandalwood, henbane, ash. A woman meets you at the edge. She is unlike the priestesses of the city, no gold, no crimson robes, just linen bare feet and a garland of dried herbs in her hair. Her eyes are lined not with kohl, but with sleeplessness. She is a dream reader. She asks for no offering, only your silence. You follow her to the platform. Around it others sit in quiet meditation, men, women, children. All here for one thing, to dream a truth that cannot be seen in waking life. And how is this done? With touch, with trance, with ritual not of punishment, but of surrender. You are led to a shaded room where herbs burn slowly in clay bowls. 2 attendants wash your hands and feet. They speak softly, not in Babylonian, but in a dialect you don't know. You are offered a drink infused with blue lotus and ground fig. Bitter, earthy, numbing. Then you are brought to a mat. There the dream ritual begins. It isn't violent. It isn't even seductive in the way the temple rites were. It's intimate, almost unbearably so. Your body is stroked with warm oil, not for arousal, but to open, to soften, to let go. One hand on your chest, one on your brow. Pressure, stillness, breath. And then something shifts. You aren't asleep, but you aren't fully present either. The woman's voice guides you. She tells a story not with words, but with breath. She whispers into your ear, then pulls away. Another whisper. Then another. You begin to see what she sees. A lion made of smoke pacing a circle. A girl with fire in her mouth walking through water. A man with no face sitting beneath a tree made of bones. Your body responds as if it knows these things, as if it has waited to see them. And then the story turns inward. The dream becomes about you. You see yourself standing in a temple, naked, hands open. But the temple crumbles. A flood rises. You're swept into the sky, then fall into a garden. Not Eden, something older, wild, frightening in its beauty. You reach out and awaken, sweat on your neck, the taste of iron in your mouth. The dream reader watches you calmly. It came through, she says. She gives you a tablet. Blank. Write what you saw before it fades. You do, clumsy cuneiform, barely legible, but you preserve what you can. Then she asks the final question. What did your body feel? You hesitate. Then answer honestly, terrified and free. She nods. That is the truth. You learn that for centuries these sanctuaries have existed outside Babylon's laws, not against them, just beyond their reach. Here, sexuality isn't a tool for power or punishment. It's a conduit, a way to pass through the veil and touch something beyond reason. The dream readers are trained not in seduction, but in listening. They interpret not what you say, but what your skin remembers, what your muscles reveal in tension, what your heartbeat betrays in rhythm. You ask if this is prophecy. No, the woman says, prophecy is for kings. This is revelation. It's for you. You stay longer than you planned. You watch as a young man dreams of drowning, only to wake in tears and be held until his breathing steadies. You see an old woman come with the ashes of her lover, asking to feel him again one last time, and she does in the warmth of a hand pressed to her spine. There is pain here, but it is chosen. That is the difference. Here nothing is taken. It's given. When it's time to leave, you're given a small bag of herbs. Burn them if you forget who you are, the dream reader says. You pass back through the gate. The city waits for you, smoke rising from its morning fires. But now you carry something different. Not just stories of horror and control, but the memory of your own dream, a moment when your body was yours. Not for worship, not for law, just yours. You return to the city with questions. Did the kings know about this place? Did the priests try to shut it down? Were there others like it hidden in caves and gardens and basements beneath the ziggurats? You'll never know because Babylon didn't carve these stories into stone. They were written in skin and forgotten by those who never understood them. But now we return to the city, because our next step is not into ritual or judgment. It's into legacy, into how Babylon exported its sexual laws and sacred terror far beyond its walls. Because when an empire rises on the control of desire, that control spreads, and so do its shadows. Let's follow them. The city gates yawn wide, and for the first time you pass through them, not to flee Babylon's grip, but to follow it. Because the reach of Babylon didn't end at the riverbanks or the ziggurats. Its influence seeped into every neighboring kingdom it touched, carried by traders, generals, and scribes like embers hidden in cloth. And where Babylon went, so too did its understanding of sex shame and sacred terror. You join a merchant caravan heading north. They carry lapis-grained scrolls and secrets. Among them are midwives, exiles, storytellers, people who once lived beneath the towers of the city and now live by retelling what they fled. One woman cloaked in blue linen walks beside you. She never gives her name, only says she once served in the temple of Ishtar, but left after a prophecy turned against her. She doesn't speak of what happened, but you see the way she moves, deliberate, cautious spine stiff as a blade. She carries a small bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. Writings, she says, but not for gods. You learn that these scrolls are letters passed between women across the borderlands. Some are love letters. Others are warnings. One details how to fake the virginity cloth using goat's blood and a scrap of sheep wool. Another describes how to turn a fertility chant into a curse against a cruel husband. These aren't scripture. They're survival. You arrive days later at a smaller city, Assyrian, but newly influenced by Babylonian rites. You visit a shrine that mirrors the temple of Ishtar almost exactly. Same stepped architecture. Same perfume of frankincense. But here, the worshippers are unsure. The priests read from Babylonian hymns with heavy accents mimicking words they don't fully understand. They've imported the rituals but not the meaning. Still, the structure holds. The same division of women. The same offering of sex as transaction. The same silence around consent. The merchant woman shakes her head. They copy the form, she says, but they do not feel the weight. In the market, you see vendors selling carved ivory charms identical to those from Babylon. Phallic figures, fertility idols, vulva pendants strung on bronze chains. A new generation wears them now, not knowing they were once given only to those chosen by temple law. Children run through the streets singing a nursery rhyme you recognize from Babylon. But here, the words have changed. What was once a hymn to Inanna has become a cautionary tale. If you touch before the moon is full, the lion will come. The warning remains. You meet a man who claims to be a former palace scribe. He fled after refusing to alter a judgment tablet, one that falsely accused a young man of defiling a noble's wife. The truth didn't matter, only the outcome. The rituals followed us, he says, but so did the rot. In his home, he keeps clay tablets etched in secret. Not law, but stories. Tales of men who loved each other without hiding. Women who bore children without shame. He's trying to preserve an alternative history, one that wasn't approved by kings. You read one tablet aloud. It tells of a village where no virginity cloth was required, where marriages were not assigned but chosen, where pleasure wasn't traded for status and fertility wasn't controlled by priests. You ask if the village ever existed. He smiles. No. but it could have. He gives you the tablet, a gift, so that not all memory belongs to Babylon. As you move west with the caravan, you hear more echoes. In Elam, a ritual involving sacred marriage has been twisted. Now a virgin girl is chosen yearly to symbolically marry the city's god. Except she's not released afterward. She becomes a permanent temple possession. In Mari Temple, dancers perform fertility rites once reserved for priestesses of Ishtar, but now they dance for coin, stripped of symbolism, the sacred commercialized. Even in distant Hattusa, rumors tell of a noblewoman executed for refusing to perform a Babylonian rite on her wedding night. She claimed it was against her gods. But Babylon's influence had already become law. And always, always, there are punishments for those who deviate. A woman accused of sleeping with her slave branded. A man found writing love poems to another man imprisoned for blasphemy. A young girl caught using a contraceptive herb buried in disgrace. They didn't learn these punishments themselves. They were taught, exported, carried in the mouths of priests and in the hands of governors trained in Babylon. The sexual terrors of the empire weren't just mythology, they were policy. Babylon's power didn't end when a king died. It lived on in laws that turned the body into a battlefield, in cities that built shrines atop the bones of their own autonomy. Even now you hear their echoes, in rules passed down as tradition, in rituals repeated without question, in shame felt by those who don't even remember where the shame began. And you wonder, did anyone resist? Did anyone ever try to burn it down? The merchant woman tells you of a town that rejected Babylonian rites, refused to adopt the temple system, declared their bodies sacred but ungoverned. Babylon responded by cutting off their trade. No grain, no cloth, no scribes. Within a generation, the town vanished. History remembers them only as heretics. But someone still remembers their name. And that's what frightens empires most. Not war, not rebellion. Memory. You return to Babylon weeks later. Changed. You see the walls now not as monuments but as masks, covering a system that did not die when the city fell. Because Babylon's true legacy wasn't its towers, it was its stories, the ones etched in clay and in flesh. But before we finish, there's one more place to go, not to a temple, not to a courtroom, but to a burial site. Because how Babylon treated its dead, especially those who were broken by its rituals, will tell us what it feared most and what it tried hardest to forget. Let's go there next, to the edge of the desert, where the bodies lie. You travel south along the winding trail, where the palm trees thin and the wind grows hotter with every mile. Babylon disappears behind you like a fever fading at dawn, its towers dissolving into heat shimmer. What lies ahead is emptier yet heavier. The burial lands, not the ones marked by royal tombs or stone inscriptions. This place isn't for kings. It's for those the gods forgot. The desert here has a way of swallowing things. Statues, names, rituals, bodies. And yet something always remains. A buckle of bronze, a comb carved from bone, a tangle of hair long since parted from its skull. The wind uncovers more than it erases. Your guide is an old man with skin like sand-worn leather. He once worked in the temple, he says. Dug graves for unsanctioned deaths. You ask what that means. He chuckles. The kind we didn't want to explain. He leads you to a shallow depression in the earth. At first it looks like nothing. But then you see the patterned clay bricks laid in a loose spiral, bones just beneath the surface. You kneel, brushing sand away. A child. Face turned to the east, mouth still open. No adornments, no offerings. Just a dried flower tucked behind the ear, placed by someone who loved them, or who couldn't stay long enough to mourn. These were temple-born, the old man says. Daughters of priestesses, sons of forbidden lovers. Infants with no father to name them. Buried here because no god claimed them. You ask how many lie here. He doesn't answer. You walk on past low stone markers etched only with crude symbols, a hand, a spiral, a broken reed. These aren't official graves. There's no record in the archives. And yet these dead exist. You find a row of women buried side by side, their wrists bound even in death. Some have charms around their necks, symbols of Ishtar of Shamash. They were temple women. Executed, punished, abandoned. The guide tells you a story of a high priestess who fell in love with a stable girl. It wasn't the love that was forbidden, it was the refusal to end it. They lived in secret for years until someone betrayed them. The punishment was swift. The priestess was sentenced to death by starvation in the ziggurat crypts. But her lover, no trial, no ceremony, just dragged into the desert and buried alive. This is her grave, he says, pointing to a mound circled with small stones. They never even gave her a name in the records, but she's still here. You sit beside the grave and the silence presses against your skin, heavier than any hymn. You wonder how many stories ended this way, unwritten, unnamed, unavenged. And then he shows you something else, a field of ash. It doesn't look like much now, just scattered blackened sand, the remnants of a fire long gone. But the bones beneath tell another story. Burned, charred, smashed. This is where they brought the ones who were caught practicing the dream rites, he says. Said they were sorcerers. Said they used sex to call demons. You ask if they did. He shrugs. They used sex to remember. That was enough. In the center of the field lies a ring of obsidian stones, black smooth, reflecting the sky. They say if you dream here, you'll see the ones Babylon tried to forget. You lie down, unsure why. Maybe it's fatigue, maybe something deeper. The heat hums against your skin. The stones pulse. You close your eyes, and you begin to dream. You see the woman from the ziggurat, her tablet still clutched in her hand, eyes ablaze. You see the boys marked with ink, their scars glowing silver. You see the priestess and the stable girl dancing in the dark, no one watching but the stars. You see them all. Not broken, not lost. Just waiting. You wake with tears on your cheeks. The guide hands you a jug of water. Some things, he says, refuse to die. You walk on past the graves back toward the edge of the city, and now you understand something different. Babylon didn't just ritualize sex. It ritualized forgetting. But the body remembers. The earth remembers. The silence between stone and sky remembers. You reach the edge of the burial lands just as the sun dips low, casting the sand in hues of blood and amber. The towers of Babylon shimmer once more in the distance, but they don't look eternal anymore. They look fragile, because you've seen what they tried to bury, and it's still breathing, still burning, still rising. We return now not to the temples or palaces, but to a quiet room where the scribes of Babylon sat with their styluses crafting the stories that would survive. And we ask, what did they choose to record? And what did they leave out? Because history doesn't remember everything. But what it forgets, that's where the truth often hides. You return through the northern gate, cloaked in dusk, feet still dusted with the desert's silence. Babylon looms before you, brilliant, yes, but different now, like a mural you've stared at too long. The colors still shimmer, but the cracks have begun to show. Beneath every tile of lapis lies 1,000 buried truths, and now you're ready to enter the one place that controls what is remembered and what is deliberately forgotten. The scriptorum. It's smaller than the temples, quieter than the courts, but no less powerful. This is where Babylon writes itself into eternity. Here the stories of gods and kings are hardened into tablets, pressed with styluses, dipped in oil, and placed on shelves as thick as tree trunks. It smells of clay wax dust and something more elusive, curation. You're greeted by a man with long fingers and a head shaved to shine. He calls himself the Rememberer. Not his name, just his function. He asks you nothing, only gestures to the rows and rows of shelves. This, he says, is what Babylon allows to survive. You walk the aisles. Tablets line the walls from floor to ceiling, thousands of them, pressed with lines and wedges and curves. Every edge sharp with permanence. This is not a library, it's a vault, a mausoleum of meaning. You pick one at random, a myth. Ishtar descends into the underworld, stripping away her clothes, her titles, her powers, layer by layer, until she is naked before her sister, Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. The underworld refuses her. She dies. She rises again. She returns more terrible than before. The Rememberer smiles. Even our goddess knew desire was dangerous. You ask how many of the stories here are true. All of them, he says, and none of them. He leads you to a room where tablets are still being made. Scribes sit cross-legged on reed mats, pressing lines into soft clay, their faces like stone. No one speaks. The only sound is the scratch of stylus against earth. These are the official stories, he says, approved by priests, reviewed by kings, etched for the gods. You glance over a scribe's shoulder. A tablet lists the lineage of a priestess, pure of blood, daughter of a noble line, chosen by Ishtar herself. You know it's a lie. You met a girl like this in the lower quarters. She told you her family sold her to the temple for grain. You ask what happens to the stories that don't make it to the tablet. He tilts his head. They return to dust. You ask, and the ones that defy the king's version. He smiles. They never existed. He leads you to a locked chest, opens it with a heavy key pulled from a string around his neck. Inside, damaged tablets, burnt edges, incomplete lines, mistranslated glyphs. These were dangerous, he says. Too raw. Too human. You read one. A poem by a temple boy writing of his secret lover, a servant who sang lullabies in Sumerian. He compares the boy's voice to milk over embers, his touch to wet clay at dusk. It is tender, unapologetic. The last lines are smeared as if by tears or rain. Another, a confession from a midwife who refused to perform the purity test on a frightened bride. She was imprisoned for obstructing the divine. Her tablet ends with the words, "I did not want her to bleed for their comfort." You ask why he kept these. His voice is quiet. Because lies are fragile, and sometimes truth wants to be remembered. You sit there among the broken tablets, and you feel the weight of it all. Babylon was not built only with bricks and law. It was built with omission, with careful forgetting, with rituals designed not just to control bodies, but to control memory. You realize now that the most terrifying sexual practices of Babylon were not just the rites or the punishments. They were the stories that erased consent, the stories that glamorized suffering, the stories that turned control into worship. You leave the scriptorum with a single shard of broken tablet, etched with half a line. And in that moment, she chose. You never learn what she chose. But it's enough. Because in a city obsessed with obedience, the idea of choice is the most dangerous word of all. You walk through the streets of Babylon one last time. The temples still shine. The priests still chant. The markets still echo with laughter and haggling. But underneath it all, you hear something else now. A rhythm. A hum. Like a secret wanting to be spoken. You pass a woman nursing a child, her eyes watching the sky. You pass a boy drawing circles in the dirt, his fingers smudged with clay. You pass a wall where someone has etched not cuneiform, but a Mark III lines crossed in an X, a symbol of remembering. And now it's time to close this circle, to return to the beginning, to the goddess who started it all. Because before kings and priests and scribes twisted her name, Ishtar was something else entirely. Let's meet her once more and see what remains beneath the myths. She waits where she always has, at the center of every myth, every temple, every whispered prayer spoken through clenched teeth. Ishtar, Inanna, Queen of Heaven, goddess of love, war, fertility, and destruction. To understand Babylon's terrifying practices, you must pass through her, because everything begins and ends with her. You stand now before her oldest shrine, older than any palace, older even than the ziggurat. Carved deep into the stone are images that predate the empire. A woman with wings flanked by lions holding serpents in both hands. Her face is serene. Her eyes are unbearable. She's been called many things, temptress, mother, destroyer, savior. But her rites were never about simple sex. They were about power disguised as surrender. Surrender disguised as power. And always, always about the body. Inside the shrine, there's no altar, no offerings of wine or meat, just a pool of still water lit from above by a shaft of morning light. The reflection you see there isn't yours. It's hers. The priestess behind you whispers, she doesn't want sacrifice. She wants truth. And that truth is frightening. Because Ishtar's rituals were never clean. They didn't promise healing. They demanded transformation. She descended into the underworld naked and alone. She stripped herself of her robes, her jewelry, her identity, piece by piece, until she stood bare before her sister, Ereshkigal, not to die, but to remember. To remember what it means to be a body and not a symbol. What it means to want not for a god, not for a king, but for herself. This descent became ritual, and Babylon turned that ritual into law. Women stripped bare for temple rites were said to mirror Ishtar. Men who cut themselves in ecstasy, danced in her name, were said to be possessed by her. Couples joined on the platform were not themselves, they were Ishtar and Dumuzi. Their pleasure was divine, their cries offerings. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The descent was no longer personal, it became a command. No longer an invitation, an expectation. And so the rites twisted. Pleasure became obligation. Desire became proof. Pain became holiness. Ishtar was no longer a guide. She was a threat. You read texts that describe her as devourer of men, crusher of lovers who brings joy that ends in death. And you see what Babylon feared. Not just sex, but the woman who chose when, where, and with whom. The woman who said yes and meant it, or no and didn't flinch. The woman who kissed not to serve but to feel. She was the ungovernable body, and so she had to be rewritten. The priestess opens a scroll and reads lines older than the city itself. I am the woman who howls in the storm. I take what I want. I give what I wish. I am not yours. These words were once sung at solstice. Now they are hidden. And you understand Ishtar herself was transformed. From goddess of choice into an instrument of control. Her image weaponized. Her rights legislated. Her ecstasy institutionalized. Babylon kept her name, but it buried her essence. And the people who suffered most, they weren't just the temple girls, the enslaved concubines, the punished lovers. They were the believers, the ones who genuinely thought Ishtar would meet them in the ritual, who offered themselves fully and were left with silence. You leave the shrine as the sun rises. You pass a statue of her in the city center, gilded, stiff, lifeless. She holds a spear now. Her breasts are armored, her hips hidden beneath royal robes. She's no longer the one who wept and bled and moaned. She's the protector of empire. And yet at her feet, someone has placed a flower, a real one, wilted at the edges, plucked from the gardens behind the brothels. You bend to look closer. It's wrapped in a scrap of cloth. You unfold it gently. It's a prayer, scrawled in charcoal. Take me as I am. Let my body be mine again. Let my wanting be clean. It's unsigned, but the voice is familiar. It's hers, and yours, and every voice that was ever silenced in her name. You rise the prayer in your hand, because Babylon may have tried to shape Ishtar into what it needed her to be. But somewhere beneath the layers of control, shame, and spectacle, she still waits, wild, mouth open, arms extended, not to be worshipped, to be seen. And now as the city brightens around you, we come to our final step. Not another temple, not another ritual. Just a question. What happens when Babylon finally falls, and the people begin to remember the truths buried beneath her golden mask? The ground trembles before you feel it. A low, distant rumble like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Babylon doesn't fall all at once. No empire ever does. It cracks first in whispers in memory, in the silence after a name is spoken, and nothing echoes back. You stand on the roof of a home near the northern wall, looking down at a city glittering in the last rays of its imagined eternity. The ziggurat still catches the sun like a fang. The temples still ring with prayers. But beneath it all, something has shifted. It started with forgetting. Now it continues with remembering. You walk through the streets with your hands open, not in surrender, but in witness, and what you see is unraveling. A statue has been defaced, Ishtar's face chipped, not out of hatred, but clarity. Someone has scratched new lines beneath her eyes, tear tracks, an apology for how far she was taken from herself. In the marketplace, a woman recites a version of the sacred marriage poem, but she replaces the king with a farmer, the goddess with a midwife, the temple with a kitchen. Children listen wide-eyed, and no one stops her. Even in the brothel quarter, the tone has changed. Ninushka is still there, but older now. She holds court at a low table telling girls not how to please but how to escape, how to use herbs not to cleanse but to choose. The men still come, but fewer, and the girls, some of them choose to leave. The house of judgment, quiet. 2 cells are empty. A priest's robe hangs abandoned on a hook. The harem locked. The shrine to Ishtar someone has written in fresh ink across the threshold. Desire is not yours to manage. And deep in the archive, someone has rearranged the tablets. They've placed the broken ones in the front. You pick one up. The lines are faint, almost lost. They asked me to open my body like a gate. I closed it like a fist. You carry those words with you. Everywhere you walk now, you see the ruins before the ruin. The foundation still stands. But the belief, the fear, that's where the collapse begins. Empires depend on memory. They feed on forgetting. But Babylon's stories, its true stories, have begun to resurface. A child sings a lullaby that ends in rebellion. A girl at the river pierces her ear in the pattern once used by the unclaimed. A boy paints his fingernails with temple ash and declares he dreams in both tongues, man's and woman's. And the body long ago turned into a canvas of shame and performance, begins to breathe again. Inhale, exhale, unmeasured, uncontrolled, alive. You sit one last time in the garden beneath the ziggurat, where the dream rites were once feared. Now someone has planted herbs, mint, blue, lotus, fig. You crush a leaf between your fingers. The scent rises familiar, not sacred, not profane, just human. And you realize the most terrifying sexual practices of ancient Babylon weren't the rites or the laws or even the punishments. It was the lie. The lie that said your desire was dangerous, that your body was a battleground, that your pleasure was someone else's to authorize. But now you've seen too much, and what you've seen can't be reburied, because memory once awakened never returns quietly to sleep. You stand, you walk, you leave Babylon behind, not in ruin, but in truth. The goddess doesn't follow. She walks beside you, silent, unbound, free. And as night falls around you, you carry nothing but the broken prayers of the forgotten and the fierce quiet, knowing that even in the heart of empire, you remembered. And that remembering, that was the beginning of freedom. So now you're back in your own bed, safe, warm, maybe still wrapped in the echo of everything we uncovered. Babylon is behind you, but the weight of its stories lingers in your bones, like a dream that refuses to fade with morning. Maybe your breath is a little slower now. Maybe your eyes are heavier than they were when we started. That's good. That means you've traveled far. You've walked through firelit temples and quiet graveyards, past stone columns and silent archives. You've heard the voices no one wrote down. You've felt the rituals that shook the city and the rebellions that cracked its walls. And even now, as you lay in the quiet of your own world, you can still feel the whisper of that ancient wind, hot, perfumed, unapologetic. You've seen the stories Babylon didn't want you to know, the ones buried beneath clay and shame and ceremony. And through it all, you've listened with the gentlest kind of bravery. That matters, because sometimes remembering is its own kind of revolution. So let yourself drift now. Let the soft hum of the fan or the quiet in your room wrap around you like a second skin. You're safe. You're home. You're far from the temples and trials, the ceremonies and secrets. Just rest. And if you dream, maybe you'll find yourself beneath starlight, walking beside the river again, with Ishtar not as goddess, but as guide. And maybe, just maybe, she'll whisper, "You remembered."